Oh, I didn't. Yeah, good. Alrighty. Yes. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Rugby Muscle podcast, live Q&A edition on the Rugby Muscle Athletes Facebook page. I'm your host, as always, TJ, and as always, with these Q&A editions, I'm going to be rattling through a few of you guys' questions. More today, I think we've got one big question that I'm going to try and run through, and I'm happy to take some feedback from you guys and find out about your training splits, you guys listening, and I'll get into that. So the question is about training splits. But before we do, a couple housekeeping notes. So if you are watching on the Facebook feed, give it a thumbs up. It helps it appear in everyone else's feed as well. Helps us create a bit more of an atmosphere on this live Q&A as we keep going. If you're watching on YouTube, thumbs up helps out the algorithm. And if you are listening on the podcasts, you can always take 2 minutes, give us a 5-star review. And if you do that on the podcasts, you will stand a chance at winning a free one-on-one consultation with me or a free month of Team Rugby Muscle, which is world-class strength and conditioning delivered directly to you. Like I said, today's question, I did promise, who did I promise? Let me see. I promised Luke that I would go in depth on his question because it's one that we can go in quite a few directions. So as I'm going, if you guys are watching this on the live and you have any comments or feedback or ways that you train that you want to sort of have me analyze, we could go into that. But for the most part, this podcast is going to be 40 or so minutes answering I think I'm just going to spend most of the time on this question, but I've got a couple other questions that if I knock it out of the park too quick, which doesn't always happen because, as you can tell already, I like to ramble on a little bit. So if I do so, then we'll just stick on this question. If I find that we rattle through this question quite quickly, I've got a couple other questions. But as always, if you guys have a question that you want to ask live right now, give it a thumbs up, comment below, comment that question, and I will make sure to answer any questions that are asked live before I end this podcast. So anything that you want to know, slot it in the comments below. And without further ado, let's get into it. So the question comes from Luke, who says, "Hey man, I only just discovered the podcast and I'm currently making my way through all previous episodes and loving it. I know you're a fan of full body workouts and I find they suit my lifestyle perfectly." Perfect, great. We could finish this. It could end that question there. However, they seem to be the least covered style of any workouts on any bodybuilding/gym sites. Do you have any basic principles or useful advice for building my own full body program? Cheers. Yeah, I do. So, obviously, there's a reason, and that I have sort of come out with this, and I've so really I'm very not vigorous, but I'm very strong in my stance here that full body workouts of some description, and I'll get into that as we go, are by far the best way to train for the vast majority of people, if not every single person. And that could even be upper body splits, upper lower body splits, which you can still do other things, so they would still count as full body every single day or every single session. I think by far they're the best, and I'll get into why here. But before I do, I want to clear up a few things. So firstly, the discussion around training splits to me is way overdone, right? The amount of training splits that you'll see in it, and I think it's because they've got to sell bodybuilding magazines, or they've got to keep writing new articles on websites, or they've got to keep selling fitness magazines. Same thing, here is the new way to train this, and they give you an example of a training week, and they do that with every single article, and a new article comes out every single week. Give this one a go, give this one a go, give this one a go. And it's cool information to read. I mean, even to this day, with all the knowledge that I've accrued, I do still enjoy looking at other people's training splits and how they decide to plan out their training. Now, it's overstated because its importance is very much about what it means to you, how you arrange your training, right? The split itself doesn't dictate what the training needs to be. The split itself is just how you've arranged what you're doing and when you're going about doing whatever you want to do. So I really think that rather than trying to find the perfect split, you've got to find so many other things first, right? If you're just discussing training splits, it's kind of like talking about how many meals you should eat in a day without thinking about the calories. Like, oh, should I eat 2 meals a day or should I eat 6 meals a day? Which is better? And there's no possible answer to say, oh, you should have this many meals. It's the same thing for your training split. You can get fantastic results training only twice a week. You can get fantastic results training 10 times a week. You can get shit results training 10 times a week, or you can get shit results training 4 times a week. You can train all of those sessions as body part splits, or you could train them as like almost full body. Now, there are different ways that can be awkward and better, and there are trade-offs, but that's everything to do with training is about how you can manage your trade-offs, and have, the most win in your column and the most loss not in the program, right? So I think really it's most important is like, do you have like the correct amount of volume to get the stimulus that you want? Are you training at the correct intensity to get the stimulus that you want? Are you improving at those volumes, at those intensities? Are you improving adequately week on week on week on week? That is what's going to make you better. And then you adjust your training regime to either fit your lifestyle, fit the different lifts that you've got to get in, different training modalities that you've got to get in. But overall, that is far more important. I think people try and, they think about their split and then they figure out, and then they try and figure out what like they should be doing for training. It should be the other way around. Like, you need to figure out what you need to do to get better, or what you need to get better at first. Then you figure out what you need to do. You figure out if that can fit your actual complete physical time constraints, whether by work, family, training, like rugby training, other lively things that you're supposed to be doing. Then you can arrange how many sessions you can make. Then you can arrange what would be most optimal to split those training sessions up. Now, the other thing I want to clear up before we get into like the overall principles of full body training is why this is the case that it's not really seen too much. He says that, full body workouts seem to be the least covered style workouts of any bodybuilding gym sites. I think it's number one, it's because again, you can do a lot more different things with training different body parts. Like you can like split them up so many different ways. If you were just to publish a new article every single week for years on end and only be doing full body workouts, it would eventually get stale, or it would get the same. Whereas if you can say, oh, today or in this split, you'll train chest and biceps, and then in this next split, you'll train chest and back, and this next split, you'll train chest and triceps, or the next split, you'll train upper body. Like you can keep rotating through and then giving all of those different options various protocols within them. So it can keep it novel. The other reason is that the top bodybuilders tend to use them. And there's a few reasons for that as well. Number one is, like, from an actual physical training standpoint, why they would do it, why you would rationalize them to say that that body part splits are the best for them. I'd say it's mostly because if you look at the size of some of these top bodybuilders, they are, 120 kilos minimum, like shredded. That is, and a lot of them are like 5'8" and stuff as well, or like shorter. That's fucking huge, okay? That means their muscles are fucking huge. That means that the amount of stimulus that they need to give to their muscles is going to be massive in order to get it to grow, right? If they came in at, like, you could take your mum, right? And just never trained before and never done anything. And you can make her do 10 body weight squats, or 2 sets of 10 body weight squats. And the next day, her legs would be like, not jelly, but they'd be pretty stiff. And she could just do bodyweight squats like on a weekly basis, and she would actually get some good leg growth. Likewise, if you just did push-ups or whatever, right? On these bodybuilders are on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. They need so much volume to grow, but not just so much volume, but so much weight, right? So, these guys, if they're doing a leg session and they've got these giant quads, they're not going to just tack on 225 pounds or 100 kilos and just do a few sets of 10 and say, yeah, cool, that's enough. For the most part, they can't even do squats because it puts their back at so much risk because they need so much weight. They need to move so much tin, which means that in general causes so much damage. It's also like a practicality standpoint. Actually, no, let's get into the practicality standpoint after. It's going back to the actual physical thing. So they've had to put so much force through the muscle that it's going to end up taking like a week to recover from that amount of force that they've had to put through the muscle anyway. So then it's better, you're better off sort of splitting it up anyway. And if you're put in, Ronnie Coleman 2,000 pound leg press, you're probably not going to train that within a few days. You're going to probably need a few days to recover from that. So that way it makes sense, right? Because they are literally destroying the body parts, or not literally destroying them, but they're really tearing them down with so much volume, so much intensity that they need a week to recover. If they were to do full body style, they just wouldn't be able to get the stimulus that they need because their muscles and they need so much weight to grow. Well, actually, because they need so much stimulus, they would need so much weight that they just still wouldn't be able to recover in time. So if you're using that much weight, you might as well keep adding in extra volume, because you're not going to train within 3 days anyway. You're going to need a few days to recover anyway. So you might as well, you've already invested 50% of that time. You might as well put the other 50% and do all of your 100% of your weekly training within that first session, or within that one session in a week, and give yourself the week to recover. Okay. So that sort of ties in the physical and the practicality standpoint as to why they would do that, because it takes them so long to recover, because they need to put that much stimulus, that they need that much to recover. You and I don't need that much stimulus to recover. But they do. That's why they do that. The other thing is, it's like a time standpoint, right? If you are like, I've seen natural guys that have trained full body every day, and they've done it with relative success. The problem is that it takes 2+ hours every single day. Like, that just isn't like overly practical, right? So therefore, they would choose to do it something differently. A lot of other people, that if they've got 1 hour, then they might be able to do an upper lower split every single, and then they're still kind of doing, you could still do full body every day, and I'll get into that in a sec. But even if they do an upper lower split 6 days a week, that's still, going to take about an hour every single day. That's quite a lot of an investment to make. Whereas if again, practical standpoint, other people, if you're just doing one body part each session, that would also take an hour. And again, the crazy volumes that some of these guys use could even be an hour and a half for these small body part splits, and then you would only hit a muscle group once a week, and that would kind of make sense. The other issue is, or the other reason that they do it, is because it's more fun, right? The amount of guys that I've trained with, where I've said, right, we're training, they're like, right, what are we doing today? Chest? I'm like, ugh. And I put my hand in my face, or my face in my hand, and my hand in my face. I somehow put it just right in my face. I'm just like, you fucking idiot. What are you talking about? What are we training today? I've planned this out. That I'm probably, if you're my friend, that I'm all about full body workouts. And they get a bit disappointed because they're like, oh, I like to train the muscle, so I get a really good pump. Because if you're just doing 3 to 6 sets in a session, you're probably not going to get a huge pump. like you can do if you do real high volume, or if you hit it quite well, like if you find movements that work really well for you, and if you split up appropriately and you train at the right intensity. But for the most part, you're not going to get the same pump that you would do if you did 4 different movements and 4 sets on each of those movements. That way you would really feel a pump. And some people, like, you like that feeling because it feels like you're growing. I mean, fuck, Arnie said it in the legendary Pumping Iron that it's like coming. Okay, he's like coming in the gym, and he actually since came out and said that that's not quite true. So he cleared that up for everybody. But point still stands that it's a good feeling. It feels like you are literally growing. You feel like you are growing that muscle. So people like doing that, and then they just don't question it. And when you look at the very top bodybuilders, they're going to be doing these splits and growing from them regardless, because the top bodybuilders are the top bodybuilders because they are the genetic elite. It's kind of it's like bodybuilding and athletics are 2 of the most sports where it comes down to like almost like genetics is going to be one of the big, if not is by far the biggest factor in whether you are successful at that endeavor, right? I could have trained perfectly from like the age of 3, as hard as I could and as perfectly as I could, for either bodybuilding, and I'm quite a big guy, for either bodybuilding or athletics, and I still would like, fuck, I'd be so far away from like a high level, like a proper professional elite international level. It's ridiculous. And even from a bodybuilding standpoint, you could give me all the gear from the perfect age as well. I'd be big. Like, you'd see me walking in the street and I'd be impressive. But would I be a top bodybuilder? No. Right? And so the top bodybuilders are the ones that have just the most genetics. Doesn't mean that they're doing whatever, like, their training regime is perfect. It usually means that whatever training regime they do, they fucking grow because they've got, like, these amazing genetics. So they would happen to do the body part splits because that's where it's everywhere. You see it on every magazine and every website. So then they would do these body part splits, enjoy them, grow from them. Why would they change it? They would just keep doing it, keep growing it, and then they're the best because of the genetics. And obviously they still train hard and it's still somewhat effective for the reasons that I've already sort of laid out. But it's, you know, it's not because it's by far the best. And then you've got like selection bias. Like if you listen to Ronnie Coleman on the Joe Rogan Experience, for example, like I love the dude, man. Like he inspired me a lot when I first started training. Like watching his clips back in the day, him screaming out "Yeah, buddy" and doing all that stuff. It was awesome to watch. Now, does he know too much about his own training? Not really. Like you hear him talk about it, and he sounds like a nice guy. He sounds like he knows what like some of the things he knows, but clearly he doesn't. Like I would actually, if you were to ask me, hey, Ronnie Coleman wants to train you for free. If he said he could train me for free, I might just do it for a bit, just for bants, but probably not. Like, and that's not me being arrogant. That's just me saying he's a top bodybuilder because of his genetics and obviously how hard he worked, how much fun he had, how well he recovered because of how low stress he is. All these things sort of merge into him being an amazing bodybuilder, but it's not because of his own training knowledge. And so when you look at what the top people are sort of putting out there, there's a lot of selection biases. They're just happen to be the best. I always say I used to use the example, like you wouldn't think Wayne Rooney would be like the most amazing. If you asked Wayne Rooney what would his advice be to make you the best football player in the world, like what's he going to say? Just be really good. Like he doesn't really know too much. He just happened to be really good at this sport. It's definitely the same thing for bodybuilders, if not even more so. So, with that all being said, why do I prefer full body workouts and those variations? Basically because it's, actually, let's do it the same way that I just did why the bodybuilders do it. Science-wise, like actual physical science, what's the best? It's clear that we're still unsure on what exactly frequency affects in terms of muscle growth, but we know for strength and for muscle growth in general, 2 times a week at least is optimal. 1 time a week is actually definitely significantly below the optimal amount of times that you would train a muscle in order to make it grow as fast as it can. This isn't to say that 1 time a week cannot work, but 2 times a week is almost definitely always better. So that's been clear in studies after studies after studies after studies. From there, we sort of say, okay, if 2 times a week is good, is 3 times a week better? It depends. Like the sort of principles that I would apply is like the more often that you train a muscle, the more volume it needs each session. It's like what I said before. What you're doing with your training is you're trying to find, like, over the course of weeks and weeks and weeks, a good volume to get the results that you want to get. Now, that volume is a weekly volume. It's not a daily volume or a session volume. It's a weekly volume that you then would divvy out over the sessions. There's a rationale to say that if you train, the more often you train a body part, the more volume you could get because you've just got that much more time to do it. You could also argue that you're going to get more volume because you're fresher, right? So let me get into that real quick. If you did 3 sessions a week, 2 sessions a week, or 1 session a week, and your goal was to get your 15 sets of your 15 sets for a given exercise or a given muscle part, if you were to do it 1 time a week, you would have to get all 15 sessions in that one training session. Okay? If you were to do it 2 times a week, you'd have 1 session with 7, 1 session with 8. If you were to do it 3 times a week, you could do 5, 5, 5, evenly split it out. Now, on a set standpoint, that would be the same volume. Now, if you took the same weight and had a rep range to aim for, and you said, right, I'm going to push this weight to failure, or if you took you could choose the weight and you would just try and hit a 10 rep max or something, or you train at an equally good intensity. When you're doing the 5 plus 5 plus 5 in 3 different sessions, you're going to lift more volume because you're going to either do more reps because you're fresher, or you're going to lift more weight because you're more fresh. Hopefully that makes sense. So for example, if let's do squats, for example, right? Front squats, 5 sets, back squats, 5 sets, leg press, 5 sets. Okay? By the time you get to the legs press in the 1 session a week with 15 sets, you're already going to be pretty knackered. Your legs are going to be pretty tired. Your lower back's going to be tired. You're going to be like, your respiratory, your lungs are going to be pretty gassed because you've already done 10 sets of fucking squats. You're going to be tired. Okay? Then you've got to load up that leg press and you've got to try and, really push that out for another 5 sets. Versus if you're doing just 3 sessions, or if you're doing just 5 sets in your 3 sessions, then, it's a separate day. So you've got a completely new day. Maybe you've trained another muscle part before that, but nothing like 10 sets of squats. You can then load up the leg press and smash it and actually have a really productive session because of it. So that's a really practical standpoint as to why, like from a practicality standpoint and an actual overall total volume and how much stimulus you can get out of it, why I prefer dividing your training up over several sessions. And then if that wasn't enough, then we're looking at the science. It's clear also that the more volume that you train with, like you've got to understand that a muscle is not just a muscle. A muscle is comprised of different fibers, right? You've got your fast twitch and your slow twitch. And if you really dig into the science, you will know that there are actually 2 different types of fast twitch fibers. And they both grow at different rates according to different exercises and different rep ranges and different stimulus that you give those muscles. For the most part, the more volume that you use, actually not even for the most part, this is, again, crystal clear in the science. The more volume that you use in a training session, the more you'll start to train those type 1, those slow twitch fibers. Because the fast twitch fibers, they're like a bright, slow twitch is like a bonfire. Fast twitch is like a really fast firework. It's a big explosion, boom, a lot of energy, but then it's done. That's your fast twitch fibers. And they can only last for so long. So again, when you're in probably like by the time you're in your 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th set of a given session on the same muscle group, your muscle fibers your fast twitch fibers are pretty knackered by that point. So they're not going to put too much effort in, which means you're going to rely a lot on your slow twitch, which are strong, but slow twitch, they're a lot slower, which means that they're not as effective for like out and out strength, and definitely not as effective for out and out power. You will lose power if you do too much volume in a session. That's why I always say when you're doing a power and a speed session specifically, you should leave that session feeling fresher than what you started it, because you should be just awake, you should have had that bang, and then you're out of there. You're not trying to keep lighting that same firework, because it's just going to burn out even worse. And so the more you train, again, the more volume you train in a given session, the more you'll train those type 1 fibers, which means the growth for them will be, or the way the system's in place to grow your muscle will favor those type 1 fibers, because they'll be pretty destroyed, and the slow twitch fibers, they'll be pretty destroyed and they'll need to grow, because they're the ones that we'll most use in that session. Whereas if you just trained your fast twitch fibers, then of course you would then preferentially recover and grow those fibers, which means you're growing essentially you're growing a faster muscle, right? You're growing a more efficient, especially when it comes to rugby, like muscle fiber that will help you more out on the field, help you gain more strength, help you be more powerful. And in fact, you're not going to get, it depends on what level you're at. Like if you're at a high level, then actually you will. If you train too much volume, you could actually absolutely get slower. And you'll see it from people, you see those people in like local rugby clubs where they get so muscular that they get slower. This is the reason, because they train with so much volume per muscle group, which means that they end up growing more type 1 fibers, which means more of their weight is type 1. Now for the bodybuilder, that doesn't matter, right? Because all you're trying to do is increase the muscle size, the appearance of the muscle size. Doesn't matter, like you're not on stage as a bodybuilder, or even if you're a fitness model, you're not getting pictures taken, lifting giant weights and showing how strong you are. You're showing what you look like. Whereas if you're like, this is the Rugby Muscle Podcast. We're training here to have our muscle grow for rugby, which means it needs to perform, it needs to be stronger, which means we cannot do too much volume per muscle group in a given session, because not only will it preferentially train the slow twitch fibers and grow the slow twitch fibers, which make you heavier without a purpose, it will also, and this is probably like even the worst point about it, is that you've got two types of fast twitch fibers, right? You have type 2X, which is very, very, very fast, like the stuff that you'll use in out-and-out sprints, 1-rep maxes, etc. Then you've got 2A fibers, which are they're adaptable. They could be, they're like semi-fast, they're for when you're doing like a 200-meter sprint, because you're obviously not doing slow twitch, but by that point you've burnt through your 2X fibers, and you're not using absolute power and absolute speed, but you're doing as high intensity as you can. Those 2A fibers, and what your body does if you're doing a real high volume session is actually convert those 2X fibers to 2A fibers. So your muscle fibers that would really preferentially fire as fast as they can, as explosively as they can, for example, making a massive hit, massive tackle, doing a really effective carry, any action that you do pretty much that is worth a note in rugby is done using 2X fibers. Your body is actually going to convert those to 2A fibers. So you have less of those 2X fibers, you have more of those 2A fibers, which isn't like that itself, the fact that you lose your 2X fibers is a negative. Getting more 2A fibers isn't overall a massive negative, because it helps for just general if there's a long phase of play. But as we've discussed time and time again on this podcast, you're looking at 10 to 20 seconds at most for a high intensity activity in rugby. 20 seconds being like never really happens. It's about 5 to 10 seconds, if that, of your impact, and then you're recovering. So you're taking away from how effective those 5 to 10 seconds of impact could be if you do too much volume in a session. Hopefully that makes sense. If anyone's watching live, let me know if you have any questions or if that does make sense. I will start to move on and potentially come back if that was confusing for you. Now, again, bodybuilders are okay with that. If you're training for only for how good you want to look, that's okay. You're okay to gain type 2 fibers, and in fact, maybe you'd preferentially do that because those fibers have a lot more growth potential. That's why you don't see, like, it's actually why, the top athletes, sprinters and stuff like that, you can get too big. Otherwise they would just be giant, because you're like, well, if you want to be as fast as you can, you've got to grow the biggest legs that you can. There's a point where that trades off, right? Cool. So in terms of how you would actually program it and how you program your splits over your week, you would essentially look at your life. Look at when you train, look at when you wake up, when you go to work, when you go to bed, when you go to school, family time, what time you eat dinner, what time you do whatever social activities, what time you go to rugby training. You would plan that all out. Then you would look at how many sessions you can make a week, right? You would also then at the same time, that would be one page or one aspect that you would look at. Then on a complete different aspect, you would look at what do you need to improve in your rugby, right? Do you need to get bigger? Do you need to get, what do you need the most? Then also, what do you want to improve upon the most? Can, be a certain aspect. For example, if you're already quite big, but you want to get a little bit bigger, and you also want to get faster, or you need to get faster. Your need is that you need to get faster, and you also kind of want to get bigger. You're already strong enough, etc., etc., etc. Figure out what those two things look like exactly for you. Those two things are all, before we've even got into anything else, are going to make that program completely individualized already for you. They're gonna fit around your schedule. It's gonna fit around your schedule. It's gonna do the movements, the training standpoints that you need to improve, to get to your goals and whatever you want to improve upon. So already that is very unique to you. From there, then we look at sort of a practicality standpoint. When's the most practical time for you to train? And again, if some people say that, I've only got one 30-minute session to make a week, that's the only time I can fit it in, then look at how much time you're watching TV, look at how much time you're spending doing downtime. Where can you rearrange that? For example, for the most part, an easy correction is getting in the gym. And I said this on the podcast previously. One of the easiest fixes is to go to bed earlier, wake up earlier, and you've got that very early morning slot as a practicality standpoint to consistently hit the gym. Now, once you've done that, then the way I like to do it is view your rugby days as you would split up your days as, all right, when can I go intense and when do I have to back off? Because you want to get maybe 2, if you can 3, intense days where you're actually either working heavy, you're working powerful, you're working fast, you're working that real high output power conditioning type, which is again either heavy or fast or powerful anyway. And you're going to improve at those, one of those aspects. Those would be ideally on your days that you train rugby, because we're going to assume that your rugby days are going to potentially be overly stressful and fatiguing for your body. So you want to give yourself as much room to recover from those, which means that you're going to consolidate your stresses. Basically means you're going to try and keep the things that are really highly stressful, that are going to beat your body into the ground, on the same day. That way you can get in, do the intense stuff, and then recover on the other days. If you were to sort of spread out that load and you were to do heavy or powerful or intense work on those days away from your rugby, then you have really intense rugby sessions. You're sort of highly stressed, highly fatigued all week. You're never recovered enough to really push that intensity, really push that weight, that strength, that power as high as you would be able to. And especially when you're looking at it from a speed power aspect, you're never going to be fresh enough to train those qualities. You're just going to be always sort of fatigued, and you're never going to be fully recovered. So it's always best to do your power stuff your speed stuff, your really heavy stuff on the same day that you do rugby. And I understand that that's not quite practical for everybody, in which case I would just keep them as far away from your rugby sessions. Like, give yourself as much time to recover between bouts of intensity as you can, okay? So most guys watching this are going to be training their rugby on a Tuesday and a Thursday. Ideally, you can train either Tuesday, Thursday morning, or if you're doing speed work, you could do the speed work before your power work directly before your training session. If morning training is out of it, then that's when I would do that. Then that means your other days are going to be low to medium days, which again can be customized to whatever you need to do. It could be technique work, it could be hypertrophy work where you're just going in and hitting anything between 8 to 20 rep ranges. Obviously, the more isolation stuff that you do, the less in overall body fatiguing it's going to be. You could do core work. You could do like low intensity aerobic work. You can do anything to boost your performance at the low, as long as you're keeping that intensity away from like being massively stressful. And you can combat that by either like tapering the weight. You can combat that by doing nasal breathing only. You can combat that by tapering the speed that you lift at. You could combat that by doing only isolation movements. That would also be a feasible way to do it. And in general, that's kind of it. That's how you would go about doing it. Now, if you don't train rugby and you're only looking for like growth stimulus, do I still think that you should train full body every day and you should have higher and lower days? Yeah, I do. I still think that that's by far the best way to do it, because then you're going to mix up your intensities, and that way you can still save yourself for as much effort in your high intensity days as you can, while still getting a good stimulus on the low intensity days by working 15 to 20 reps, and you're still getting that pump work as well. So then again, you're working across a spectrum of rep ranges. You're going to train a spectrum of fibers to get the most efficient growth that you can. And then even if it's like you could do, right, and this is sort of the different aspects that you could do upper, lower 3 days a week, so you do for a total of 6 sessions, or you could do upper, lower twice a week for a total of 4 sessions. And I would still count those as full body if, for example, you could do, of those 4 sessions, you did upper, lower, rest, upper, rest, lower, rest, right? That's your training week. You could do that. And then you could do like your calves or glutes or a weak lower body part on the upper body day as well. So then you hit that body part more often, you get more growth. Or you could do especially with the arms, like you could do biceps, triceps, it gets a bit sketchy with the elbow. You could absolutely do deltoids, you could do traps, and you could do abs on those, like all 4 of those days. Biceps you could do on all 4 of those days. If you did 6 times a week, you could do biceps on 6 of those, or you could do biceps on 4 of those 6 sessions. Like so you would do them on all 3 upper body sessions and then 1 of the lower body sessions. There are so many different, again, and this is where, and this is the kind of like, this sort of brings us full circle as to how this is talking about the right tool for the right job. It's not about what training split is perfect. It's about what do you need to do over the week and how is that best divvied out. Without knowing what you need to do over the week, it's very difficult to give you perfect examples of how you would divvy that stuff out. But hopefully I've done a good job here. Like, hopefully I've sort of nailed it and sort of explained why the full body, like why you shouldn't look at splits as being like a black and white rule, because you could do upper, lower, off, upper, off, lower, off, and you could train calves in all of those sessions, and you could train biceps in all of those sessions. Realistically, you're never going to create the amount of damage with just doing biceps, like that they need to, like that would damage you so much that you cannot recover, that you need to take days off to recover from biceps. In fact, some of the best arm growth I myself personally, and I have seen from a lot of other trainees, guys that I've worked with, and just guys like out there in the physique space, have come from when they've trained biceps every day. Same thing I've seen with calves. A lot of people will say, like, if you have small calves, then one of the best ways that you can train it is just to train your calves every single day. So rather than look at the splits, look at what you're trying to do and then figure it all out. Look at the practicality of it. Like, there's also that in mind. Like, if you're doing, if you're looking at upper lower, and you're like, right, actually, I also want to train my quads. Sometimes it's difficult because if you're doing squats, it's difficult to train just the quads, or if you're just doing leg extensions, you know that like they're not as effective as like real heavy proper movements like squats, lunges, split squats, etc. But they're nowhere near as damaging. So is that really going to be effective? Yeah, we're not overly sure. And so like look at it from a practicality standpoint. Like if you're doing lower body and you're like, right, I've already taken 30 minutes to build up to 140 kilos on the squats, then yeah, you probably want to train heavy with that stuff, and you probably don't want to be doing that every single day, or you probably don't want to be doing another quad movement the next day, or one where you have to load it up. So really look at it from a practical standpoint, what applies to you, how you can divvy up the exact training that you need to do, and therefore what do you need to do to improve. There is no perfect training split. There is no like perfect methodology to do whatever. There is no terrible training split. It's whatever you need to do to fit your life, and it's whatever you need to do to fit the training that you need to accomplish in order to make the improvements that you want to make. Cool. 40 minutes. Done quite well here. I think we will answer one more question just for the bants. This comes from Lockie. He says, I've recently got a bunch of resistance bands. I've been leaving them around my apartment. Don't do that. Don't be a slob. Clean up your mess. I've started doing band pull-aparts, not really counting the reps. Jamie Lewis from Chaos and Pain mentioned doing random tube exercises throughout the day. Thoughts? So, again, it's like what I said earlier. Like, right tool for the right job. What's the purpose of this? And people always say, "Oh, shoulder rehab," but shoulder rehab is like there could be so many different things. In order to get a strong, there's so many things that can go wrong with your shoulder, which means there are so many different things that you could do to correct your shoulder. I've worked with people that have got weak pecs. Rare is that is the case, but these people were swimmers, and then therefore their shoulders actually came too far back, and the weak pushing muscles was what made their shoulder a bit of a dodgy shoulder. For the most part, that's the opposite problem that most people have with their shoulders. Most people they do too much pushing work, whether that's overhead pressing or pressing vertically. So therefore your shoulders round forward, which means you need to pull them back into place by getting stronger traps, stronger rear delts, and stronger upper back muscles to pull them back to keep them in place. And band pull-aparts are fantastic for that, as are face pulls. But for the most part, that comes from a strength and a hypertrophy standpoint. So you would want to train that like how you would train any muscle. You would just want to preferentially try and grow that either by doing it first, either by doing it more often, or by really making sure that you are doing the most volume and really targeting doing that, training face pulls, training pull-aparts, training bent over rear delt flies. Those sorts of movements are going to have more bang for your buck than just randomly doing band exercises each day. Now, there's obviously a grease the groove concept here, where if you're just doing it all the time, it could be good. But again, I don't like this grease the groove output, and I said this, I think, when we first went into lockdown. There could be a theory where people are like, oh, I'm working from home now, and I've got a home gym. Could I train every 2 hours on the bench press, and would I get stronger? Then the answer is no, because you're spending so much time in that fight or flight, what's the word here? You're spending so much time in a real high stress state. You're a fight or flight state. Yeah. So that means you're not spending enough time in the recovery. And obviously, we know that it's the recovery stage where you get stronger and where you get all that growth. So I don't like that. I think you spend too much time in a high stress state, not enough time in your recovery, and there's a reason that even the top like weightlifters, strength athletes don't train all the time, because they could if they wanted to. The most often and most frequent you see people train is Olympic lifters, and they might train up to 10 sessions a week, a couple 2-a-days, but they still really spread those apart. They build up to the intensity, and then they get the fuck out and they recover. They don't just consistently do it throughout the day. If that was the most effective way, trust me, you would have seen it by now. That's what people would be doing. Now that is looking at how you would use the bands and how you'd rehab the shoulders from like a strength standpoint, from like there's a weakness somewhere. If you're just really, really, really immobile and you're just trying to like sort of lubricate the joint, you're trying to get more rotator cuff. Number one, get stronger rotator cuff as well. But yes, this is where this might actually be some sort of benefit. Overhead taps are my favorite. So if you have straight arms, try and keep your arms straight. You go all the way over your head, tap the back, tap your lower back. I can't do this on this video, but keep your arms straight. There's a video of me doing them on YouTube. In fact, I'll link that in the show notes here. Let me just make a note. Link front and back taps. Okay, so that would be one of the easiest, like best bang for your buck, lowest hanging fruit type of movement that you would do to lubricate the shoulders. But in general, that's not usually the problem with shoulders. The problem is some sort of weakness and some sort of instability. But if you want to loosen them up, that's a really good way to do that. Maybe throughout the day could work. To be honest, I haven't done enough research on this. This isn't sort of like where... Like I've always got enough benefit from strengthening the right areas to improve shoulder flexibility and stability versus just doing lots of stuff throughout the day. I kind of can see where it could work. I'm just not overly convinced on that being the most appropriate. And by all means, like Lockie, keep doing it, and maybe we'll revisit this in like a couple months, and we'll see. And you've got the most mobile shoulders in the world, and turns out that was perfect. So, okay, I think we'll finish the podcast there. Thank you guys so much. As always, thumbs up, give it the hearts, comment below again, because I'll get to this question. I'll get to these Q&As any questions asked on this Q&A. I'll get to them in the next one. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, thumbs up. And if you ask on the YouTubes, I'll start answering the questions from the YouTubes as well. That would be great. I'm going to do another 2 of these next week. I think they will be on either... I know one will be this time next week. If I can get it at 9 o'clock my time, if I can get this fucking internet... if I can get this fucking internet working... don't worry, we've got 3 more weeks in this apartment where we can get the fuck out of this useless fucking AT&T shit internet. And we can actually find like a good connection and stop. Mobile companies in the US are the worst, and internet companies are the worst. Like, what sort of service are they really providing? Like, the satellite's already there. I'm paying so much money. Just let me connect. Stop holding me back. Stop stopping me from doing a perfectly timed live Q&A, you assholes. Anyway, that's by the by. Big rant over. Next week, Friday, 9 a.m. my time, Wednesday or Monday, I'll let you guys know on the Facebook group. If you're listening to this on the podcasts, Rugby Muscle Athletes on Facebook, search for it, ask the questions, you'll get them all answered live. Hopefully I'll keep wearing the loud shirts. Cheers, Tom. See you guys in the next one.